Welcome in, everybody, and happy Tuesday. It is GC Live Talking Tuesday nights. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva.
Yeah.
And the Gamecocks are 2-4. There's no other way to slice it and dice it. USC had their opportunities this past weekend. We will get into that. We will also look ahead to the Missouri matchup this weekend because, quite frankly, as much as we want to sit here and probably, dwell on what took place this past weekend, it's over with. And the Gamecocks don't have any time to be feeling sorry for themselves because they have 6 games left. They're 2-4, as we mentioned. And if they want to become bowl eligible, and look, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there saying, I don't want to go to the Birmingham Bowl. I don't want to go to the toilet bowl. That guy, I get that. But at the same time, too, when you think about the future of the program, being able to get those 15 extra practices, especially knowing how young this program is, how young this team is, and how young the future is. And, there's some bright spots. Getting those extra 15 practices would be absolutely massive. So there's no question about that being able to win for these next 6 games to become bowl eligible would be big. All right, as we do every Tuesday, though, before we get into any of that, Shane Beamer and the players had a chance to meet with the media today. We had a chance to be able to hear from Nicholas Harbor for the first time, and I think got to go all the way back to the beginning of the year. Haven't heard from him forever. Mario Anderson. There's a lot of good players we had a chance to hear from. But having said all that, whether it be players, whether it be Shane Beamer, what's your biggest takeaway from the day today, Joe? Because I know you were there with me.
Yeah, there were a lot of takeaways, whether it be from, Shane's foot, kind of distracted a little bit from the defense. I know that's the thing that's making headlines, and I'm sure we'll talk about it maybe a little bit, Mike, because it's what's kind of getting out and making its round on national media. But the biggest takeaway for me, at least, is that, because we got a lot of defensive players today too, as they should, because defense has been the question of the week after that performance. But, my biggest takeaway is that they still have a lot of confidence. The only thing that you can do after a loss like that is just kind of rinse it off and take on what you have next week. And Missouri's no joke. Brady Cook, Luther Burden, we'll get into them too. But from what I took away, at least from, everything at the pressers, was this defense has a lot of confidence in themselves still. And they have to find a way. They know that a turning point needs to come sooner rather than later. So they're on top of it. And just, the best thing that they can have is confidence going forward. So at least that's my biggest takeaway, minus the, obviously the big news and the foot and whatnot.
It's hard not to talk about the defense, and we're going to get into it. We've got into it a lot. We got into it right after the game on the GC Live post-game show. We got into it yesterday on Mixing a Water Monday. Former Gamecock wide receiver Torrey Gurley hopped on, and he didn't hold back any shots. We'll get into it more today. And as you heard from Joe, he talked about the defense, and we'll talk about the defense a little bit more in just a little bit. But just to change up the topic, just so that we can have something a little bit different, right? So it's not all the same. I think the biggest thing that I took away from today was just the maturity from Nicholas Harbor, right? We've been talking about this, not just on this program. We've been going back to the summer, just sharing how much of a process it was going to be, right? You have a guy that's coming out of school as a 5-star athlete. And I think instantly people see that and people hear that, and they just expect it to be like a video game. And I'm not saying everybody, but there's a lot of people, and we've seen it on this show and other shows, where people are just assume that he's just going to be able to get thrown in there and he's going to be able to put up 100-something yards every game, right? Or he's going to be able to be a difference maker right away. There's a process, especially when you were playing defensive end in high school, when you were playing tight end in high school as well. And then you make the switch over to wide receiver and you're playing in the SEC. There's going to be a process with that. And just listening to Nick talk about that process, listening to how confident he is in himself, but how confident he is with the coaching staff.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to play some of the sound bites in just a little bit, but one quote that really stood out to me, aside from the one that I'm going to play for you guys, Nick said, quote, "I would just say since we played North Carolina, if it was right now, today, we played North Carolina, I feel like I would be way better. Just going in that first time was like, whoa, everything was just big. The crowd was big. Everything was just fast. Now the game is starting to slow down for me. Just learning the coverages more, learning the play calls faster, more urgency, my routes, how I lined up. it has just been a fun time these past 6, 7 weeks with just how much we've been playing. So I bring that up because, again, it's echoing what Shane Beamer, it's echoing what Dal Loggins, what these two have said all year, which is it's going to take some time. Now, this past week, Harbor played in more snaps than he's played in the last 3 games combined. Played in 28 snaps this past week. 28. The last 3 games leading up to that, the Tennessee game, the Georgia game, and I'm missing one game in the Mississippi State. He had 26 snaps combined in those 3 games. So I bring that up because Harbor, in the proofs in the pudding, especially after this last week, he's playing more. He's getting involved a little bit more. He only has 2 catches on the year, and one of those catches, Joe, as we saw this past weekend, was the 45-yard bomb from Spencer Rattler. So he has 52 yards on the season. He also has a touchdown from Lenore Sellers against Furman. But I bring that up because this is kind of what we expected and what we've been saying all year long, if you've been paying attention to any of these GC Live shows. So I think, look, I understand the frustration, and it's real easy once things start to go south too, when they're 2-4, 2-3, even when they were at 2-2. A lot of people are like, where's Harbor? Where's this guy? Where's that guy? Right? I mean, how many times did we do that all year long? And we didn't have a chance to hear from Harbor until today. And you heard him. I mean, again, that direct quote. I'm out there against North Carolina. I'm like, whoa, everything's faster. The crowd's big. It's different. It's different. And I want to play a soundbite from him in just a little bit, Joe. But just your overall thoughts on what you heard from Harbor today and just how he handled himself at the podium.
Yeah, I thought he handled himself really, really well. I mean, obviously, last time we talked to him was at media days, but and he was great then too, right? But he seems like he's a natural at it. Like sometimes you see a freshman get up there and he's a little scared, a little skittish of the media, but I mean, Nick handled it like a pro. Like you said, Mike, mature. Mature is the biggest word, and the biggest thing that stood out, at least of what he said, was like, he said, if I played UNC this week, like I'd be ready for it. But the game is slowing down to him, right? It's getting slower. And that's exactly what you want. And we knew like different freshmen have different times to develop. Obviously it took Big Tree and Tro, a couple weeks and they were ready by Georgia. And even Georgia was a learning experience, and also Tennessee, but Nick's getting it right. He has made the jump, right? It's slowing down to him. So I think that's huge. And again, like you said, Mike, mature, really handled himself well at the podium.
So I'm going to play a soundbite shortly from Harbor today. And what I'm trying to do before we get into that, I want to find, because I want to give him a shout out. New beat reporter over at the State, Jordan Kay. I haven't had a chance to speak with him, but I thought the question that he asked, and that's the gentleman that's going to speak shortly. I thought the way he asked this question was great. I mean, a lot of us asked similar questions, but I liked how he asked this, and he gave a very, very good answer. Got a very good answer out of Nick Harbor. So again, this is Jordan Kay. He's new to the beat, works for the State newspaper. That's the voice you're going to hear. And this is what Nick Harbor had to say in response to that question. Take a listen.
What's up, Nick? With your size, speed, and build, when they put you out in space, out wide, does it feel like you can kind of bully some of these smaller cornerbacks when you're out on one-on-ones?
Oops.
I mean, bully, I really ain't seen a lot of.
Well, that's the wrong question.
Say,
I think
Here we go. Got the right question now.
there it is.
Voices sound a little similar. Sorry, Jordan.
It
Hey Nick,
happens.
I think everyone kind of saw your hype out of high school. The stars, they see your size on the sideline and just think you're going to come in and put up 100 yards right away. What do people on the outside maybe not know about the learning process that has to take place when you get to college?
The learning process is definitely like a step harder. Like just the plays are longer. There's more to a play, and then like just with me switching positions, go from the defense to the offensive side, like it wasn't gonna be like coming in 100 yards a game. Like I thought that's how it was gonna be. Like the first day I stepped on the field, it wasn't like that. So you know, me, I just had to like slow down, you know, my thoughts. And I'm like, everybody should like, you know, I see different freshmen, you know, going, you know, doing what they do. And then like, you know, my time's coming, like I'm slowly building into it. So I just got, you know, I just got to keep growing. And then, you know, them 100-yard games going to come sooner or later.
So the reason I play that soundbite, Joe, for two reasons. Obviously, people want to hear from Nicholas Harbor, and rightfully so, right? I mean, he's a five-star freak coming out of high school, and there's been more anticipation in terms of wanting to see him play right away than, I mean, shoot, you have to go back quite some time to be able to find someone that has brought that much attention to the program. I bring that up, though, is because I think it's also a good microcosm, and it's not to make excuses up, but it's just we dissect, right? We can sit here, we can just keep bitching, like complaining. Excuse me, if Shu sees that. We could keep complaining about, you know, people getting upset about the defensive coordinator or, you know, some of the depth that they had. The reality is USC is where they're at right now. Okay, they're where they're at, and certainly they have to make some adjustments, right? And I'm not saying that no one is safe, right? I mean, people are gonna. This is a big boy business, and at some point, you're gonna have to be held accountable. At some point, I say all that though because where USC is right now, the reality is when you take a step back and you break down where things are. When I listen to Harbor talk, I think it's a microcosm of what the bigger issue is from this team. And it's not something that we haven't talked about this year. We've talked about this. They're a young team. They're thin at multiple positions. They're going to be even thinner this week, perhaps, if Stone Blanton doesn't play. Right? USC, and there's been a lot of talk from this fan base, it feels like lately, about them playing a 4-2-5. Why don't they switch up and play a 4-3? Why don't they play a 3-4? With what bodies? With what bodies? They don't have the depth at certain positions to be able to do certain things to a point where, yeah, you have your All-American from last year, All-American freshman, Nick Eamon-Worry. He has to play nickel because there's not enough confidence in someone else to play that position. USC's been fortunate over the last couple of years. Got a transfer a couple of years back with Patel. You've had different guys slide into that position. Cam Smith, right? We talk about how Spencer Rattler's like spaghetti sauce, as Dal Loggins offense likes to say. Cam Smith was like spaghetti sauce last year. He could cover a lot of things up. And I'm not talking physically in terms of playing the cornerback position. He was able to play some nickel too and cover up some of the issues and the blemishes that you had. You don't have that luxury this year. And they're trying to figure out, okay, who can we play in this nickel spot? And a lot of people could say, well, why are they playing a 4-2-5? Again, they don't have the bodies. They might not even have four linebackers that you could truly play this week. Imagine playing never mind playing a 3-4, Joe, or 4-3. Stone Blanton's not out there this week. My goodness. So again, I bring this up because this is the reality of where USC is at right now. Some of those guys, again, mentioned in Harbor, it's going to take them some time to get to that point where you could trust them because they're so young on defense. They're young on offense as well. I just don't understand, though. I just don't understand what people truly want this defense to do. I'm not saying what they've been doing is, I mean, they rank second to last in the country in pass defense. Something needs to change. And I think it's the $1 million question. What the heck do you do when you are thin at certain positions and guys aren't ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really tough. And Shane's been talking about it. He previewed it a little bit during Florida, like his Florida presser too. But like when you have so many guys, especially on defense, Mike, when you have so many new faces, it's hard to learn all of the defensive sets and all of the adjustments on the fly. So you have to simplify it, right? And then especially, I mean, looking ahead to Mizzou, you're playing a coach like Eli Drinkwitz, who's really schematic. It's going to mix it up. The adjustments at the line of scrimmage are going to be different, and you can only put on so much for a guy that hasn't been, necessarily rotating in with the ones and running the game plan and learning the defense. So it makes it really hard. And that's why, Nick Eamon-Worry has to move down to nickel. And so things like that happen and injuries happen. But at a position like linebacker where you entered the season really, really, really deep, and now with Stone Blanton dinged up, like you've lost two of your three starting linebackers, and it's really tough. And you need your linebackers. I mean, obviously like the captain of the defense and kind of just directing traffic more or less because it's really hard to do from a safety spot. So when you lose those two guys, man, it really, really hurts, especially for, like I said, the role that you need to play as a linebacker on the defense. It really, really hurts when you don't have guys that know the defense inside and out, right?
Kiwi, I'm trying my best, man. I'm trying. Kiwi says Mike is giving the fan base way too much credit. People calling for Shane's head after one down season, excuse me, with the hardest schedule in the nation. I think too, Joe, to go back to what we were talking about with how thin they are. I'm reading on the message board today. I don't know how much you saw it, but I think there was one person. Give him a shout out, Mr. Cock. I think that's actually what his username is. I'm not just saying that. He's saying, media members are talking about, who's traveling and, number of people traveling, and our defense is one of the worst in the country. Again, everything that we're talking about right now, it all connects, right? We're talking about the issues that they've had, and it's not just in the secondary. It's easy to look at the secondary because when you make a mistake in the secondary, you can't cover that up. There's no one behind you. You make a mistake up front, you have two other lines behind you. Two other levels. You got the second level and you got the third level. You got the linebackers and then you get the secondary. But the reason we talk so much about traveling today and who's going and the numbers and all that kind of stuff, again, if Stone Blanton's not able to go, and I know there's been some people that feel like he's been playing a little slow at times, and he's been asked, we've said this before, he's been asked to do probably more than he would have if it weren't for the injury to Mo Kaba week 1. But if Stone's not able to play, and Stone's been able to give you a lot of snaps this year, that's going to leave Debo Williams and now Pup Howard having to play a lot. And then from that, I think Bam as well. But I bring that up because from a personnel standpoint, number one, if you want to see some type of personnel shakeup, it's not going to happen right now. It's not going to happen as far as schematics. But number two, this weekend, if you thought they were thin before, they're going to have to get really creative. And even if Stone is able to play, I don't know how you're going to be able to cover that up, because Stone might not be 100%, even if he does play this weekend, right? I mean, maybe be 100%. He might not be even 90, 80, 70, whatever the number you want to put on it.
Yeah.
The bigger problem is you go back to this past game, the number of snaps that USC's defense faced. I think there was about 86, I think is what
I think he said 86, yeah.
86. And more than 50% of those snaps USC blitzed on, and they were playing man coverage. I'm bringing these things up because it's not just the secondary that you have to worry about when we're talking about man coverage, right? Yeah. I mean, we could talk about, different matchups, personnel, all that kind of stuff. But there's going to be plenty of times where linebackers are going to be asked to be in pass coverage. So when you have that, and you might be down someone, and oh, by the way, and Shane mentioned this, what goes into deciding, too, who travels, especially when they're thin at certain positions, can those players make an impact on special teams? Can you bring them for more than just playing one position, right? Are they versatile? Can they play on special teams as well as play on, in this case, defense? But an offensive guy, can he play on special teams as well? So I'm not saying that USC can't pull off the upset this weekend. I'm certainly leaning towards picking Mizzou this week for our Gamecock Central picks. But it really worries me when you already have a defense that has been so shaky, because even if they had won this past weekend, still would have been saying a lot of the same things. Defense is still shaky. And it's not just the secondary. I think the big issue, Joe, is yes, the secondary has not been playing great, but when you rank towards the bottom of the country when it comes to sacks and when it comes to tackles for loss, I don't care how good your secondary is. Okay? I don't care how good your secondary is. If you don't put pressure on the quarterback, at some point, even the best secondaries in the world aren't going to be able to cover. So what happens when you have a secondary that hasn't been playing that well, And again, I don't want to put all the blame on them, but they haven't been playing that well. And you're not putting pressure on the quarterback. You're not being able to finish blitzes. You're not being able to finish plays like we saw the other night. At some point, something's going to give. And when you do have some loose ends, and in this case, as we've mentioned, with Nick Eamon-Worry having to play nickel just because of the lack of trust, perhaps, the coaching staff has at that position with other players, it leads you wondering, what else haven't we seen with this defense? It feels like this is already rock bottom. But if they're going to be more banged up this weekend and they can't put pressure on, it could get ugly. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy here. I'm just looking at it based on what we were told today and based on what we've seen in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, again, Missouri is a very, very tough task to defend. I talked about it in length about it on the walkthrough on Sunday. But Brady Cook is sneakily having one of the better years out of any quarterback in the SEC right now. I think he's getting overshadowed because plays for Mizzou. And granted, they are up, they're ranked, and he's getting some of that. But like, if you think of the SEC, you don't necessarily think of Mizzou, and let alone at the quarterback position. But Luther Burden obviously is the guy that you're mostly talking about because he's leading the SEC in receiving yards. So both studs, and you're going to have to find a way to get pressure on Brady because, LSU did that. They forced him. I mean, Brady hadn't thrown a pick up until the LSU game 2 weeks ago. LSU got pressure. Credit Brian Kelly. Like he did get some different looks in Brady's face, and you're going to need that out of your defensive front. And we got both Tonka and Boogie today. And they both talked about it like, hey, like we know we have to do our job better. And, this week is no different, right? Because Brady is such a good quarterback and you're going to need to disrupt the passer just against anybody, really. I mean, yes, you can't afford to not get to the passer and get different looks in the SEC. You're going to get beat if you're doing that. And it doesn't help out the DBs when the quarterback has all the time in the world to make a decision and then you're caught back in coverage and sometimes it's busted coverage and you get beat. And, so that happens. They were on the field way too much. Shane talked about that, reiterated it today. I know he talked about it a little bit after the game too, but yeah, just really, really tough. And again, Missouri, it's not going to help. And then you got to go on the road to Kyle Field too. And Jimbo knows how to coach some ball. And I mean, we'll get to that next week, but yeah, Mike, it could be a long, long afternoon in the other Columbia if you let it happen.
So the reason I bring all these things up, and some people will probably be like, well, Mike's just making excuses. That's fine. You want to say that, that's fine. Because again, we also sat here, we talked about the reason why Nicholas Harbor probably wasn't playing right away. And a lot of those people, I'm sure, are the same people that said, oh, yeah. And then we heard from Nicholas Harbor today. And a lot of people have been silent about that. So, look, if you want to get frustrated with Clayton White, I get it. At the end of the day, it starts with the coach, right? Your coordinator. So I understand that. I totally understand that. But at the same time, too, and if you go back, and I specifically spent a lot of time watching that last drive, that touchdown drive by Florida, not the safety drive, but, this the touchdown drive, the conversion on 4th and 10. The comments, at least on Saturday, I know Beamer had some comments today talking about like the foot injury, and that's kind of made its rounds, but the comments, at least on Saturday, that Beamer made, I know some people were kind of thrown off by it, and some were acting like, oh my goodness, he's throwing the players under the bus. I viewed it as accountability. Beamer goes up there every Saturday, and he always, leads off with, hey, it's my fault, it starts with me, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, too, I don't care who the defensive coordinator was this past weekend when it's 4th and 10, and you do have the play drawn up the way that, as we saw it, in USC, not only were they not able to finish it, but they weren't able to do it properly. And it goes back to this idea that I keep reminding myself of is we're hearing a lot of people complain about certain things about the defense and like, oh, maybe they practice that. Did they do this? Did they do that? Not to bring people back into the Frank Martin era, but it reminds me a lot of, when USC would miss free throws and people would be like, oh, do they practice free throw shooting? No, they don't. No, they don't at all. It's like, how dumb, how stupid do you have to be to say something like that? So I bring that up because what we saw this past weekend, again, a lot of it I'm talking about that last drive, but you can look at multiple series in that game. You can look at multiple series in multiple games this year. That blitz at the end, it was there. The design was there. But what happens is, and again, talking about the lack of pressures on the quarterback, not being able to get TFLs, creating sacks, and USC ranking towards the bottom of the country in both those categories, when you're not able to do those things, right? Whether it be your defensive linemen, linebackers, in this case, you had a safety blitz. I think it was DQ that came off the edge. When you're not able to not just not get to the quarterback, but you lose contain, and the quarterback gets outside of the pocket, at some point the secondary is going to break down. And when you do have mismatches, which, yeah, do you want a safety who's having to play nickel lined up against a guy that's been having a phenomenal day like number one was having for Florida the other day? No. But again, I don't care who that nickel is. If you are giving that wide receiver and that quarterback the amount of time that USC was giving them, especially on that play and that 4th and 10 conversion, it's going to be tough for a lot of nickels. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, again, I bring these things up because when we talk about what the issues are with South Carolina's defense, if you just want to say, okay, fire the coordinator, I get it. But that's not happening right now. It's just not. Okay? And whether you bring a new coordinator in right now or you wait to the end of the season, I mean, that's all irrelevant because at the end of the day, you have who you have on your roster. This isn't the NFL. You're not going to be able to just plunk someone off the street or trade for someone midway through the year. The players that you have in that locker room are the players that you have moving forward. And they need to find ways to be able to get things done. And if you want to talk about putting your players in a better place to be able to succeed, totally get that. I get that. I'm not dismissing that. Does USC need to maybe not blitz as much and maybe go to more zone coverage? Probably. But the reason why they're blitzing is because they're struggling so much to get there with 4 up front. That's the reason they're blitzing so much, Joe. It's that, and the other reason why too is because they have mismatches in the secondary, having Nick playing nickel. You're trying to do everything you can to throw off the time of the offense, and they're still not getting there. So that's what I would say about the defense, right? Why that's happening, what the issues are, the big picture, instead of just saying, fire this person. No, okay, that's great. Let's say you did that. You still have the players that you have. You still have to find a way to execute moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that, pretty much sums up everything on the defensive end. It makes it really tough when Nick E is playing nickel, and you just don't have as many guys back there. You need Nick E to kind of be able to play deep and kind of coach up and almost play like a deep linebacker role from the standpoint, like you have to be the field general. And out of anybody, I think, you would trust Nick Eamon-Warry with that job. But again, it's just tough when you're not deep enough, and defense is where it's the most glaring because again, it's a very complicated scheme that Clayton White runs. And so, the defensive line, again, don't let that confuse you. But the defensive line needs to get the pass rush home. And then again, credit to Jordan. Again, I'm forgetting his last name, but he also asked another question to Tonka, just kind of explaining the difference
Jordan
between
K.
I'm sorry?
Jordan K. Yep.
Yeah, Jordan K. Yeah, he asked a really good question, a follow-up question to Tonka, because Tonka was talking about, the difference between a pressure and then a blitz and stuff. And so there was a difference in the lingo and stuff like that. And so Jordan asked that, and it was a really good answer from Tonka. I can't really, because it was a little complicated for what Tonka said. So, but yeah, I again, the defensive line just has to be better. And it starts with, Boogie and Tonka, the leaders on that defensive line got to get something home and disrupt Brady, or else he'll go nuts on you.
Yeah. So again, I get the frustration from the fan base when it comes to where the defense is, and rightfully so. I mean, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. What took place the other night, especially in that Florida game, is unacceptable. But when you go back, and I'll answer some of the other questions that we have piled up now. But as my colleague Chris Clark wrote, and you can go check it out, recent article that he put up a couple hours ago on Gamecock Central called "Assessing the Nickel Position on Defense," and he writes, and I don't want to give everything away that he wrote, but I thought this tidbit was interesting. He said, in the last 3 contests, USC's has surrendered 30, 34, and 41 points respectively. The other one was Tennessee when they scored in the pick 6. Opposing quarterbacks in those contests have thrown for 487 yards, 239 yards, and 423 yards. That's crazy. I mean, there's no other way to put it. That's crazy. And again, while I sit here and we can talk about USC will probably have to make some type of changes schematically, and I'm sure they did during the bye week, and that's probably why they felt more comfortable blitzing as much as they did, just because, again, they've really struggled with just sending 4 and being able to get to the quarterback and creating TFLs, not just sacks. So I think that's one of the reasons why they blitzed as much as they did last week, but it didn't work. It didn't. Now, it worked at times. I think that's the other frustrating part, Joe. I think you may have been asking Marcellus Dial or someone else. I can't remember exactly who asked them, but and here's the tough thing when you're playing in the secondary and just looking at a defense as a whole, there were some good things that they did. The problem is when you give up 5, 6 plays, whatever the case may be, especially in the secondary, whether it be directly on the secondary or blitzes or the front 7, they're not getting to the quarterback, it's going to make the secondary look bad. So there was probably about 4 or 5 plays that as a defense as a whole, they gave up that were big. They gave up 3 of 4 fourth down conversions. I mean, there were a lot of things that was ugly. They did do some good things, but it gets lost in the mix because of how bad the bad was. You know what I mean? It's like you do some good things, that's great, but how bad are the bad? Well, the bad was really bad to the point where it cost you the game. So I don't know how much. Again, you're not going to change up your from a defensive system. You're not going to go from a 4-2-5 to a 4-3 or a 3-4, especially with how thin they are on defense as is, especially the linebacker position. But it's not just that, Joe, too. A lot of the teams that you're playing, the reason why you go with the 4-2-5 is because a lot of teams are throwing the ball all over the yard. And the game itself has evolved to a point where you're actually seeing a lot of teams in the NFL have some type of 4-2-5 in their defense. So I bring that up because it's also from a matchup standpoint in that regard, right? I mean, people are already complaining about, I think some people were still complaining about Pup Howard's speed the other day. All right, just play this game along with me, all right? Let's say Stone Blandon's 100%. You don't like the 4-2-5, and I'm not saying everyone feels this way. I'm just trying to make a point. You don't like the 4-2-5. You feel like Stone Blanton's slow. You feel like Pup Howard's slow. Okay, you're going to go with the 4-3 defense, and you're going up against Florida the other night. How do you think that's going to go? I mean, not saying that what we saw the other night was perfect by any means, because clearly it wasn't, or great, but how do you think that's going to go? Florida probably would have thrown the ball for close to 600 yards on you. So, again, I get it when you're frustrated about what's going on from a defensive standpoint, schematically, but there's other reasons why they are running what they're running. And again, there's multiple layers to it. The depth that they have, the youth that they have at certain positions, and now perhaps Stone Blanton being banged up could cause another wrinkle in this defense to have to occur. So, look, I think at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to play a little bit more zone, especially this weekend. If Stone's not in the lineup, or even if Stone is in the lineup and he's not able to give you everything that he has in terms of being at his best, he'll give you everything that he has, but it might not be close to 80% or whatever percentage you want to put on it. I think you're going to have to find a way, though, if you do some zone, you're going to have to get creative and do some zone blitzing, which some defensive coordinators, that scares them because that always is going to leave a gap open. Because you really have to get on it there. At least man-to-man, you have everybody accounted for. It's one-on-one. And I'm not saying the Gamecocks have done a great job with that because, again, Florida. But that would be one of the things I'd probably would like to see differently this weekend is some more zone defense if they're going to do some blitzes.
Yeah, it felt like they were in man a lot. And then when you're blitzing a bunch out of man, it kind of leaves you out to dry in the middle of the field. It's really hard to cover everybody. So I think that would really be the only tweak. I agree, Mike. I mean, see if you can get into more of a zone, and then you need that pass rush to get home, though, if you're in that zone. Because you need Brady seeing ghosts. Again, like I said, it'll kill you. But getting into the comments, Mike, if you want to roll some questions real quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, sweet. First one from Big Red. Is there any way to shore up our defense? We need to be better now. I felt like it's a very broad question, but part of that is schematics, right? And like we were just talking about with man, get out of man, right? And you need to let your DBs make plays in zone. And with that, like I said, pass rush. But Mike, I mean, got anything?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd like to see a little bit more zone, but I think too, and I know people, for whatever reason, not saying everyone in here, but for whatever reason, some people hate criticizing players. First off, these guys are getting paid now. So if there was any problem before with some people having, and I would have done this before even they got paid, but at some point it's all right to say, hey, Johnny needs to play a little bit better. Johnny needs to do this a little bit better. The players need to execute better. They didn't execute the other night. Okay? There's a reason why Shane Beamer came out there and said what he said. He's sending a message to his players. We've talked about this all the time. When a coach goes to the podium, he's not just talking to the fan base. He's not just talking to the media. He's talking to his players. His demeanor, how he acts. It's an extension. The way he acts, that's how he wants the players to act. Now, I'm sure some people will run with that in different fan bases and have at it, but that's what it comes down to is he wants to send a message to his players. He wanted to send a message to his players the other night, and I think the message was received loud and clear, at least based on what the players said today. Will that continue on Saturday? We have to wait and see, but just from listening to Marcellus Dial talk today and some of the other defensive players, Boogie Huntley, Tonka Hemingway, they're taking it personal. And they should. They should. They're not idiots. They know what's being said on social media, what's being said by the talking heads on TV. They know what's going on. They can sit there and say, okay, yeah, we don't listen. We block out the noise. Everyone's life revolves through a phone. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day who's not really big with social media, but something happened with their phone, and instantly it's like, wow, I didn't realize how much I depend on my phone, how much I use it. And it doesn't have to be social media. Someone's friend, someone's cousin, someone's mom, someone's dad. Hey, you hear what they're saying about your defensive coordinator? You hear what they're saying about you guys as a secondary? You hear what they're saying about you guys as a front seven? I mean, the messages got back to the defensive guys. There's no question. So if people wanted us to talk about defense, we did that tonight. We did it tonight. There you go. Talked about defense for about freaking 30 of the 40 minutes so far, if not more. Yeah. So we didn't sugarcoat defense. But
are we going? Yeah. I think I was going to say that's a great end to that point. But are we going to dip into our younger guys on offense and defense to get some kind of spark in this team as a whole? I think, I talked about it with the schematics, right? It's very, very hard, especially at this point, because you're adding layers for the vets. Like you can't really, if you simplify it for the vets, it doesn't necessarily help either. Like, they're seeing different looks and they're trying to evolve their game. So you can't slow it down for everyone. So it's tough, right? I think you're going to try to dip into more younger guys. I think Nick Harbor, there are guys that are going to be able to make an impact right away. And those guys take maturing. But I think for me, at least, I think, all of the young guys that are good enough to make an impact are starting to see the field, right? I think the last guy to kind of pop was Nick Harbor, and he's starting to get it now. Like I said, he's starting to see the field a little bit slow, see things a little bit slower. So that's helpful, but I don't know. I think that's kind of a long-winded answer about that. But I mean, schematics, and then, the guys that are going to be able to be good enough to make an impact this early are pretty much filtered in already. You know what I'm saying?
I haven't gone through the defensive side. I'm going through snaps, But I always find this one interesting, or I've been finding this one interesting the last couple weeks. I would argue that USC is playing a lot of young guys right now, a lot of young guys. And that's one of the reasons why they're having issues at certain positions. Now, some of the young guys, like Luedecke, Bubalade, and Big Tree, Luedecke, Bubalade, and Trevon Baugh.
Yeah.
Big Tree being a Luedecke. But those guys, yes, there's going to be, freshman growing pains. And I'm not even just limiting it to just freshmen. You're going to have sophomores out there. You're going to have redshirted sophomores. So from an offensive standpoint the other night, at least from just a quick count, 5 guys who are either freshmen or sophomores of the 18 offensive players the other night, they played. They saw some time. Defensively, I mean, I could go through it real quick. Let's see. Up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I've counted, and I could be off, but between 10 and 12 freshmen, sophomores that played on defense the other night. I bring that up because they're playing a lot of underclassmen right now already. And that's, not to be a wise guy, Big Ray, when I include some of the sophomores. But my whole point being is they are doing this. Now, can they do that with other positions or play some other younger players more? Certainly. But I also think, too, they're doing this in some spots because they don't have a choice. And the more younger players you play, I think we can all agree on this, the more younger players you play, the more that we talk about the growing pains that will happen. Oh, Tree or Teron Bond, there's going to be some growing pains. They're freshmen. What happens when you have more younger players out there? Because, yeah, there's going to be some people that'll be like, well, we're building towards the future. A lot of people aren't going to look at it that way, though, because they're going to expect results. Some of these younger guys, they're not always going to be ready to go in there right away. And I get it. The easy cop-out answer to that is, that's the coach's fault. Is it, though? For every player? Again, Nicholas Harbor, a 5-star athlete coming out of high school, making a transition from DN, tight end to wide receiver. We heard from him today. Hey, I had that whoa moment that first time I went out there. If he's saying that, there's going to be guys where it's going to take them a little bit longer. That's okay. Pup Howard, he's been getting a lot of playing time. He's been getting more and more, and he'll get more playing time this weekend. Jalen Kilgore's another one. So I just bring that up, Joe, because, yeah, we could see more in the next couple weeks, especially if the season continues to go down south the way that it is, but they're already playing a lot of young players. And again, some of that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're trying to just get them in there. They're playing them because they don't have a choice.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree, Mike. The long-winded version, kind of what I was trying to say. We're on the same page tonight, Mike. I love it. Carolina Titan asks, is AB hurt? Doesn't seem like we use him much, and we need another wide receiver to step up.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised and a little disappointed, too, that AB wasn't able to get going the other night. If he is hurt at all, then it's one of those things that I would say is a pain thing. How much pain can he tolerate? But I don't even want to go out on the limb and saying that's what it is. Yep. I think that's a little, that's just making an assumption at that point, because I haven't heard anything to that effect. So, look, I'd love AB to get going. He hasn't been able to score as a Gamecock yet, but he's certainly someone, as we all know, we've seen it even going back to the Duke's Mayo Bowl a couple of years ago. He has speed. I'd love to see him get going, especially with the crossing routes underneath, while you continue to get Xavier Luedecke to stretch the field vertically, and now Nicholas Harbor getting involved a little bit more. Omega Blake, I think would be great. And don't forget, too, Joshua Simon and Trey Knox. We saw the tight ends get more involved this past game in the passing game, which was great to see. But I think that is a reflection on USC making tweaks to their offensive line. 6, I think they're first, not including the kneel down before the half. 6 drives of their first 9, they scored on either a field goal or a touchdown. So, not saying the offense was perfect the other night, but they certainly looked as good as they've been in quite some time. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to just piggyback off of that before we can address what Gavin has to say, but I think look at Eddie Lewis for one of those guys that can step up. I mean, he's certainly capable. That he did it on a D1 level last year. So, and we've seen Eddie Lewis get going a little bit too. So, if AB doesn't have it going, look at Eddie Lewis as just another name to watch out for. Gavin, yeah, I had no idea that Shane didn't know about the Super Mario hat. I figured that had made its rounds, or at least somebody had kind of embraced it from the Gamecock football account or something like that. So I don't know. That one's on me. Hopefully, Shane will let him, wear that, or at least maybe he can find like a Mario branded cowboy hat or something like that. I don't know,
Intern
man.
Joe's gonna be on next week with stitches, man. Snitches get stitches.
I really hope we get Mario next week, or in a post game presser soon, because I have some apologies to be made if Shane actually comes down on it. But I mean, I think the intent was there too. Like I think Mario showing and embracing his character of Super Mario is good, and you want to see that out of your players. It means you're having fun, and the culture within the building is really good. But
all right, what else we got, Joe?
Yeah,
moving along.
Peyton asks, I feel like the season is over. Why should I believe South Carolina can turn it around? A little positivity, I guess, here.
We only have half a football season left.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like football and you've been waiting for it all year, the season hasn't gone the way that a lot of people would have liked it to have gone. Now, I'm not saying this directed at you, Peyton, because I don't know what your projections were on the season headed in. I'm looking at Intern Joe's projection, though, 8-4. See, got the sticky notes still up there. I'll have to win out in order to make that happen. But I think, look, there's a lot of young talent on this team. We mentioned Nicholas Harbor, Mario Williams, even though he's not Mario Anderson, excuse me. Mario Anderson, he's not a young guy. However, because he's one of the newer faces, he still has another year of eligibility left too. So you're getting a taste of just being able to watch football. And even if it's not the amount of wins that you would have liked to see from your team, you're also looking at it as, hey, there's some freaking good kids on this team, some real good young talent that we're getting a chance to be able to see and developed. And hopefully come next year, some of these guys that are starting just to get their feet wet. And again, Mario Anderson, I'm including him into that mix because it's his first year playing in the SEC. Some of these guys that are getting their feet wet this year, what could they do next year? Right? What could they do in terms of that growth? Whether they're freshmen going into sophomore years or sophomores going into junior years, or transfers that are in their first year at USC that do have an extra year of eligibility next year that will be back at South Carolina. So that's what I would point to, is the simple fact of, hey, you have a chance to be able to see perhaps the stars of tomorrow. And some of those guys are becoming stars today, stars right now. Mario Anderson certainly being one of them.
Yeah, Mario, Big Tree, Big Tro. I mean, there's a lot of freshmen, like you said, playing and stepping up, and underclassmen stepping up. So exciting stuff going into next year. And I mean, why should you believe South Carolina can turn it around? Well, because in my opinion, obviously you got Georgia out of the way, but Missouri is another tough game. Kentucky's going to be a dog. Kentucky, Texas A&M, they're all going to be dogfights, but they're all winnable, right? Like you go into it. I mean, Tennessee's also in your rearview mirror. Like you can go in, and if you play well, you got to play well in all phases to win these games. But there is still the chance that you can win out. Like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for this team to win out. But is it going to be hard? Yes. Do you need to have the perfect game plan and win again pretty handily in all of those games? Yeah. But it's definitely not out of the question. And then realistically, you could drop some, but it's all about how you respond in the second half of the season, right? And we saw, the late season magic with Shane last year. So you never know. You never know. That's a little bit of optimism for you on this Tuesday night.
Yeah. What else we got here?
Big Red asks, did we as a fan base have too high of expectations on our record? Was it conflated up by the coaches, or was it all in our heads?
I think it's just like, going to a restaurant and you get a good steak And you're like, man, the next time I go back, or you get a good pizza somewhere, and the next time you go back, you're expecting it to be the same, if not better, right? Um, and unfortunately, there was a different cook in the kitchen. I mean, that's just what it is right now. So I think, look, in all seriousness, with this South Carolina team, because when you look at the history of what USC has been not able to do, I guess is a better way to look at it. I'm trying to recall the number off the top of my head. Let me look it up just to make sure I'm correct with this. I believe it's 13. But when you look at the number of 8-win seasons that South Carolina has had in the regular season, at least, I believe that is 13. 13. I'm trying to go back and pull it up right now just to double check. But the reason I say that is because when you go back and you look at, and that's through the 100 years of South Carolina football. When you look at that, though, and you see what the success has been by USC, where is it? Yeah, just 13. So South Carolina has had 8 or more wins in the regular season just 13 times in their 100-plus year history. Last year was one of them. The reason I bring that up is just to point to the reality of that's just where you are, okay? You're trying to get over that hump. You want to be able to have success where you're not celebrating 8-win seasons, that 2010 to 2013 stretch, obviously the Black Magic season as well. I mean, there's been some good moments in Gamecock history, but you can pinpoint them. It's not like it's consistent. You can point out more of the bad than the good. So I bring that up because I think because of what we've seen in year 1 to year 2, the expectation was South Carolina is going to take that next step this year. They got Rattler back. They got Juice back. They got Nick Eamon-Worry and DQ Smith, who had phenomenal freshman seasons. And they haven't been able to do that. They just haven't. So I think, look, the reality is with this team being young, and I think it goes into another question. It may have been from Kiwi. Where is it? Talking about just, how young the team was. And then obviously you can't predict injuries. But when you add those things up, the season can go south real quick. And again, that's not an excuse. It's just the reality of it. That's the reason we bring it up. We're not making excuses by saying that. Where's the lie? Find the lie in there. They're young. They're thin on defense. And they've been plagued by injuries. That's not an opinion. That's a fact.
Yep. So next question comes from your boy Kiwi. Mike, I'm curious if you think Rattler is playing more conservative. His numbers look really solid in terms of completions, but I feel like he's taking fewer risk, high reward throws.
You want to take this one first, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, to an extent, right? But I think that he's just trying to limit the turnovers more, right? I think, when he gets into spots where he, has to throw the ball, like I like to call it backyard football, right? When he's having to force balls more, force it downfield, he doesn't have as good of a game, right? So being a little bit more conservative, yeah, I guess it's a fair statement to say because, if he can stay in rhythm without, throwing a pick, because I mean, that's more of a momentum swing thing than anything, right? It gets you out of your rhythm. You throw a pick going the other way. It's not fun. So like him being a little bit more conservative, it holds onto the ball. It's just smarter. I feel like he's playing smarter and just more mature as a quarterback. He'd rather, throw it short and take, the smarter throw than chuck it deep and have the potential for a big play. And I felt like we saw that a lot at Oklahoma too. And granted, like I talked about it, I said it about 10 times on the walkthrough. This isn't the Big 12 anymore. Mm-hmm. These teams are really, really good at defense and they will make you pay for it really quickly. So I mean, personally, for me at least, I think he is playing a little bit more conservative just because, your rhythm gets messed up. Everything gets thrown out of whack when you're throwing picks a lot. So definitely playing smarter, and he's just matured a little bit more as a quarterback, Mike.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact of how the beginning of the year was for this team. And what I mean by that is, number one, you just weren't having any protection up front. So what's the best way to be able to try to be efficient on offense when you're not getting any blocking? being able to get the football out of your hands quicker. So I think that's where it stems from the most. And because of that, granted, obviously there's been plays where he's run around a little bit and he's trying to make some things happen. But I think because we're seeing so many of those passes happen quicker, and granted, it's definitely changed. I'd love to be able to go back, and I don't know if I'd want to necessarily do this and have a stopwatch on every friggin' pass play, but I'd be curious to see how long it's taking him to get the ball out of his hands the last couple weeks in comparison to the beginning of the season. Throw Tennessee in there when you talk about the beginning of the year. But I think that plays part of it. And I think the other part of it too, now that they're getting the run game going, that's great. As we all know, at the beginning of the year, it wasn't there. And shorter passes, especially screens, swing passes, even quick outs, that's an extension of the run game. So I think it's a lot of it has to do with USC found success with it early on. Again, not being able to have a run game early on in the year. But number two, the blocking not being consistent forced USC to get creative. And they got creative by doing a lot of quick passes. Now, certainly they've been able to find opportunities to take chances down the field. We've also have seen guys like Xavier Leggett, the number of yards after catch, what they've been able to do when they're out in space on some of those crossing routes. But because of that success and the fact that, they're ranked pretty high when it comes to passing yards, I think they're going to continue to do that. Now, a guy like Nicholas Harbor continues to come along, played in 28 snaps, the most he's played in all season this past weekend. If he's out there and he's continuing to be a threat in the passing game, now you can get a little bit more creative. And maybe that does create some opportunities to take some more shots down the field.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with it. Big Red Ass. Mike, wouldn't you believe it? It's a defensive question. Is the defensive lack of ability to get off the field, further tire out, and make the situation worse for our young defense? Yeah, it certainly doesn't help. And I think offensively it helps when you're on the field more. But again, this defense is going to wear out, especially when you're really thin, right? We've been talking about it. I feel like a broken record tonight, Mike, and rightfully so. It is the same issues. One big thing on defense. So, I don't know. That's all I got for that one, really.
Yeah, I think, look, being able to get off the field, as we all know, and Beamer mentioned it the other day, or I should say earlier today. I think he mentioned it the other day too. It feels like this is something that we're constantly talking about, not being able to get off the field on either third down or fourth down. And again, I kind of loop in the fourth down conversions for the Gators the other day, just because that's extending the drives as much as if you're staying on the field on third down, right? You don't get a third down conversion. You're able to stay on the field on fourth down. It's the same thing. So I bring that up because I think, look, when you're on the field for 86 plays the other night and you're not being able to get off the field, what's going to happen? Guys are going to be exhausted. What happens when you're thin too, though, on defense? Those guys aren't getting as much rest as they probably should. I'm looking at the snap count right now from a defensive standpoint. And again, they played, what would we say, 86?
Yeah, I think so.
86? All right. A little sneak peek into the Gamecock Central world. So you're seeing the defensive line, okay? But behind that, and it really just shows you the issues that they're having when we talk about how thin they are. Look at that. That's incredible. That's incredible with the number of snaps that we're seeing in the secondary. Marcellus Style, DQ Smith, they played every freaking snap the other night. O.D. Fortune, he only missed 2. Nick Eamon-Worry only missed 6. So I point to these things, though, and I'm showing you guys this because when we sit here and we talk about the issues with the defense, and we talked about, again, lack of depth, being thin, being young, I think for some people it goes in one ear and goes out the other. So I'm going to show you the freaking numbers in front of your face. 86 snaps by your corner, both corners.
Yep.
Well, excuse me. 86 snaps by one of your corners, 84 by the other, and then DQ Smith as a safety.
And then Eamon-Worry's at 82.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You're
again,
gonna get beat on some of those plays, Mike.
when you're
there's a
not
chance.
able to get up, when you're not able to get off the field, and you're having the issues that they're having, again, with being thin, inexperience, all that kind of stuff. If you can't help yourself out and get off the field, you're going to see numbers like this. And at some point, there's going to be, I think Marcellus was talking about it, I'm paraphrasing, but when you're out there for as many plays as you are, especially when you're playing man for over 50% of those snaps, there's a higher possibility that they're going to be able to get one on you. And not just one, they're going to be able to get a couple on you. It's football. At some point, the offense and the way the game's designed, now obviously it's not as crazy as the NFL. Can't even friggin' touch a receiver past 5 yards down the field. That's the DB in me getting upset about some of those rules. But even in the college ranks, it's going to be difficult at some point. So if you're not getting off the field and you're playing 86 snaps, or even playing in the high 70s, Jalen Kilgore playing 70, if you're not able to get off the field, you're going to be exhausted. And you're in a situation like that where it's real easy for all of us to say, hey, it's 4th and 10, you got to get a stop. DQ Smith coming off the edge, yeah, he didn't get there for the blitz. I mean, he got there, just took a bad angle. He played in every snap the other night. I can't even imagine how exhausted he was. And that's not to say, oh, you should feel bad for these guys, because they have to get off the field on 3rd, or in this case, the other night, get off the field in 4th downs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Got another question. Pimp on a Blimp 89 asks, why do they not play Kawan Banks more? Again, I think, Kawan Banks is such a young player, and I don't know, Mike. I mean, young guy, still probably coming up through the ranks a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to say, our guys stacking good days on top of good days. I mean, that's the first thing I would think of. There's some good things that he's done earlier this year, right? Coming off the sideline and having to step up. And I just like the fact of how he's had to change his number a couple times being out there. I think that's always neat, because you don't want the double number rule on special teams.
Yeah.
Because certainly he made an impact last year on special teams.
Oh, absolutely.
I think, again, some of it has to do with the fact that it's not just the secondary's fault right now, because they're not putting pressure on the quarterback. They're not getting to the quarterback, I should say. They're not creating not just sacks, but TFLs. It doesn't really matter who's in the secondary at this point. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy for us to be like, oh, right, the secondary's fault. And I'm not saying that it's not. But they need to be able to put some more pressure on the quarterback, and not just put pressure, but get to the quarterback, create some TFLs. They need to, especially if they're going to be blitzing the amount of times that they did the other night, which I'm not saying they're going to do that again this week, because they, what was it? Over 50% is what we said. You have to be able to get to the QB. I mean, they blitzed over 50% the other night. All right. 50%. Joe, I want to ask you something, and maybe you do know the answer right now, so it's not going to be as fun. But do you know how many sacks South Carolina had the other night? They blitzed over 50% of the time the other night.
I didn't look at the sacks number, actually. I mean, can I take a guess?
Yeah, take a guess.
0.
You can guess 0. They had 4. They had 4. They had 8 TFLs. But I just feel like that number should be higher. It should be higher, especially when you go back and watch the tape. They had opportunities to have more TFLs. They had more opportunities to have. Look, I love Travis and Chuck. They're all on it.
Yeah, they're
Love
on top of it. I don't know, Mike. It didn't feel like they had any. I will go that far.
But you look at what they did against Mississippi State, and that was even higher than what they did last year against Kentucky when it came to TFLs. They had 9 against Mississippi State. I bring this up because if I went back and I took my notes down on how many sacks I could have had in TFLs, and I'm tallying everything up, probably around that same ballpark. So my point being is, they've proven they can do it. They're just not being consistent enough with it. And when you don't get there, because, again, of the flaws that they have on defense. And the fact that you have a guy like Eamon having to play nickel just because coaching staff probably just doesn't trust some of the other guys playing nickel, which it speaks volumes about the trust they have with Nick, having him play a position that maybe it's not his best position, but they feel more comfortable with him being there in comparison to some of the other guys just because of how young they are and how thin they are. I think it shows that you really need to be able to get there. And I know I sound like a broken record, but really, it's the God's honest truth. Some of this is as simple as just being able to just friggin' execute what you're doing. And it doesn't matter who the heck the play caller is. It doesn't matter who the coach is. You need to be able to execute it, especially when it's there. Especially when it's there.
Yeah.
And Chuck said, we'll get the comment up that
we'll get the comment. And
Chuck said, when you blitz and don't get there, someone's going to be wide open.
Exactly. Plenty of time to throw.
And then Travis says, guys, we're in the right spot. We're just not making plays. And that's I think the frustrating part is, again, I understand the frustration, and at some point, just like anything in life, for any baseball fans, I know we have the ALCS and NLCS going on. Terry Francona won 2 World Series with the Red Sox, but at some point they needed to have a different voice in that locker room. I'm not saying that about Beamer, but what I'm trying to get at is, from a defensive coordinator standpoint, sometimes it could be offensive coordinator, wherever the side of the ball that you're talking on about. At some point, yes, if the message isn't getting through, yes, you do have to make a change at some point. I don't think that's where South Carolina is right now. Again, when you go back and watch the tape, and it's not just from this past game, but this game was very obvious, very obvious. They're in position to make these plays. And I'm not talking about the secondary specifically. I'm talking about up front and create. Again, when you rank last, or not last, I think in the conference, but when you rank towards the bottom in the country in TFLs, when you rank towards the bottom of the country in sacks, that's a big issue. And it's going to put more stress and more strain on your secondary. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And not just the secondary, but linebackers is too when they have to be in coverage.
Yeah, 100%. So last question before we hit final thoughts, we'll ask, what do y'all make of other fan base obsessions with Coach Beamer's press conferences? Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen anything like it. Really weird. And I guess I'm assuming you're referring to the foot thing kind of being taken out of context. I get it. I mean, when Shane got here, he was a very new style coach. The thing with that Justin King and his department and all the things that they've been able to do, making, headlines just with the videos that they're doing, whether it be the sunglasses or anything really. They do a really good job of that. And so when you're on the opposing end of that, right, if you flip the script, if you were on the opposing end of that and your opponents were doing some of the things that South Carolina's doing, I would honestly be very annoyed too. So I get that, right? And so they're going to take shots, take anything out of context that they can. That's, what opposing fan bases do. I mean, this is the SEC, Mike. It just means more. It really does. So that's kind of what I'm taking from it. And, Shane, like I said, he's been utilizing social media well enough. That's probably why you haven't seen anything like it.
I think it's that on top of the fact that Shane isn't just going to give you the cliche coaching speeches, which not just as a media member, but if I was a fan of the team, I would appreciate that, right? I mean, how many times did we hear during the Muschamp era, man, I wish, we'd get less coach speech and just, be truthful. I mean, he cares about this program. He wants the win. There's no question about it that he wants the win. He broke his friggin' foot the other day because of it. And if South Carolina had won that game, which they were one play away from being able to do, everything that we talked about the defense would still be true. However, I think that I think the way that it's being perceived with Shane's foot, it would be just viewed a little differently. And what I mean by that is, it's like, man, Shane broke his foot. I'd be like, oh man, that's such a Shane Beamer thing to do. And, sure, there'd be some people from different fan bases that would still be busting his chops about it and all that kind of stuff, busting the chops of a lot of Gamecock fans. But it would be viewed differently because they won the game. You wouldn't have Paul Feinbaum going on you want to call it a rant, call it a rant, the comments that he made about Shane today. But I think it's just the fact that, again, he's just different. He's different. He's open. And when you're open, and I think some people got upset during the Will Muschamp era because of this, Muschamp didn't let his guard down when he was in front of the camera. He was different away from the camera. I had a chance to get to know him pretty well away from the camera. He was a different guy. But the reason why, and, talk to him, you talk to other people that have been around him, he let his guard down when he was coaching Florida, and it bit him in the butt when things started to go south down there. And you could see how quickly people can use that against you. Now, I'm not saying this entire fan base is ready to, run Beamer out of town. Certainly not. And I know that there's probably a good portion of this fan base that's upset, whether it be with him, whether it be with Clayton White, with whatever. And you have every right to be. I mean, that's the beauty about being a fan. But I also think, too, because of what USC was able to do last year, and because USC isn't necessarily seen as a team that wins often. They've been, I don't want to say the laughing stock. I mean, Vandy's been viewed as that way. But when you have a team that doesn't win often, and they were able to do what they did last year, I think it started to rattle the SEC. It started to rattle other people out there that pay attention to college football. So, again, you add all those things up, and then success doesn't happen the following year. People are going to be able to look at you, whether it be your program, whether it be your coach, and they're going to find something that they're going to be able to try to poke fun at. I mean, that's the reality. And the misfortunes of Beamer breaking his foot on Saturday night, it's part of it. People are going to run with that. They're going to have fun with it. R.L. Smith says, yeah, proof of how much Muschamp's former players love him. Yeah, they did. And again, I'm not, I don't bring up Muschamp's name to be able to, trigger any PTSD from the fan base. I mean, it's part of Gamecock history, right? We talk about the oral history of South Carolina football. Just because you might not have been fond of an era of football doesn't mean you just tear the page out of the book and you skip from chapter 10 to chapter 12. I mean, it's part of the history of Gamecock football. And that's why I brought that up, just because, again, having covered Muschamp for those 5 years, was it 5 years? And then I've been here for all 3 of the Beamer era years. That was part of it. Let's hit some ads, and then we're going to close things out. We'll have some final thoughts on the other side. Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Our first sponsor of the day, as always, is our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in, give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call at 803-462-5576, 803-462-5576.
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. We talk about Clint every GC Live show. And the reason why is because Clint has been a longtime sponsor of GC Live, as well as a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. So that's why when our very own Wes Mitchell was looking to buy a home, he was going through the process of trying to find the best rates and all the fun stuff, as many of you know, that goes into trying to purchase a home, especially if you're a first-time homeowner, which I remember finding out the hard way of a lot of those things. What I should have done is I should have gave Clint a call, and that's what Wes Mitchell did. That's what former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth did. He can make that process a heck of a lot easier for you. I know that one of our colleagues is actually in the process of potentially buying a home. And when he asked me who he should call, I said, that's a no-brainer. You got to go call Clint. Give Clint a call. 803-771-6933. A couple comments here. Chuck says, most players love their coaches. It's a family thing. If you ever played the game, you know. Absolutely. I still talk to my college coach. Try to do it every other week at least. I mean, he's in the middle of a season right now at Holy Cross, but Travis says, right? Chuck, you played high school ball in South Carolina? I'm assuming. I'm assuming Chuck played some high school ball down here.
Definitely did. Definitely did.
All right. I want to play this, though. We talked about the defense so much, and we kind of just took away Beamer's thunder. But I do want to play some soundbite from Beamer when asked today by David Cloninger of the Post and Courier about the defense. This is what he had to say. So again, if you want a defensive talk, we didn't shy away from it. We brought the energy tonight for it. Okay. Now you don't have to agree with everything, and that's all right. But we talked about that and bring this up. BK, so what are we doing at right tackle with Vershawn Lee out? You could see offense be less efficient in the second half. Look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat things. I think they might get creative and move some things around because what they did the other night, like you mentioned, it just wasn't the same as soon as Vershawn went out. And I give Vershawn a lot of credit because him making the move over to right tackle, I was a little hesitant with it. And I'm not saying in terms of, okay, moving him away from center. I thought he'd go to guard because that's where he played a lot of guard in the past. But they moved him over to right tackle. I thought he did a good job. They shuffled the offensive line up a little bit, and I felt like for the most part with what we saw with the offensive line, things looked better. But what does that look like now moving forward? Do they decide to move some guys around in order to, give themselves some more favorable matchups at that right tackle position? So having said all that, let's listen to Shane Beamer, and then we'll get on out of here and let everyone have a good Tuesday night. Take a listen. Shane Beamer talking about the defense.
Focus on the defense this week from the outside perspective. Are there any, scheme changes afoot, personnel changes, just what needs to happen to prevent something else happening like Saturday?
Obviously, it wasn't good enough, David. Some of the stuff that we've talked about when we call pressures, we got to be aggressive and have a mentality to get there, and you got to win, and we got to be smart about when we're calling them. I told the team this morning. I think we played 86 plays on Saturday, so that's way too many plays. We got to get off the field. And in those 86 plays, I think over 40 of them, we played man coverage with a safety in the middle or zero blitz coverage, meaning there is no help. And when that happens, one, we got to win up front, and then we got to play with great technique. And we called that much man coverage because we have great confidence in our defensive backs to perform. And, when you're on an island, we don't line up here at South Carolina and just play, two deep coverage every time and protect our corners over the top with safeties. We're aggressive, and that's why Cam Smith and Darius Rush and those guys are on NFL teams right now, and why Carlin Patel got an opportunity, and on and on and on, because of the style we play and the way we coach our guys up. And certainly every week is different. You want to continue to put your guys in position to make plays, but no, it hasn't been good enough. No, but there's also been a lot of really, really good that we've done this year defensively as well. We just have to be better, and it's technique, it's scheme, it's the calls we're making, all that stuff. So we're looking at everything, but it wasn't good enough Saturday, but we're not far off either.
And again, one of the reasons why, and I'm sure there's some people, Joe, that are going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh man, like, what is he talking about? There's been some good with the defense. They're ranked second to last in the country in passing yards per game. And I know we could do the, woulda, shoulda, coulda game, and I hate doing hypotheticals, but what he's trying to get at is, from a coverage standpoint, the longer you're going to be in coverage, especially when you're put on an island, if you don't get to the quarterback when you're sending those blitzes, then you're not going to have the amount of success that you need to, the way that South Carolina hasn't been able to when, you're talking about the lack of sacks, the lack of TFLs. So I bring these things up just because that's what Shane's talking about, is that there's been times, even the other night, with DQ Smith coming off the side and not being able to get to the quarterback, they've done some things where it's like, man, it's good. They're just not finishing it. They're not executing it the way that they need to. And again, at some point in the secondary, if you're going to ask those guys to stay out there and basically double the amount of time that they're going to have to stay on to a wide receiver, it's really going to put you in a tough position to have success at the rate that you need it to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I firmly agree with all of that. And defensively, you just need more reps for some of these guys that are rotating in. It is kind of unfortunate that you have to go through growing pains with these guys like this far into the year. But again, like Thomas brought up, 2025 is you're looking at a bright future for a lot of these guys. Like
Yeah.
Mike brought up also too earlier in the show.
Shoot, we've been looking at that date for the last couple months, just saying
Great
how
Wall of
2025
Carolina will be
can
in here, all that stuff. I mean,
And I know people get frustrated too when they hear that. It's just like, oh, I don't want to hear about next year or 2 years away from now. Okay. I get that. I think it's hard not to look at it even right now, just because of how young they are and the talent they already have in here with the freshman class and what you're potentially going to be bringing in for the class of 2024. I mean, my goodness. And, you have a guy like Lenore Sellers here already. By then, he'll have 2 years under his belt. Dante Reno will have a year of college under his belt, who's going to continue to push Lenore. So they're both going to push each other. It's going to be a fun year. But having said all that, before you get to that point, and obviously you have a whole season to go next year, and before you even get to next season, you got to finish this year. How does South Carolina intend to finish this season? Again, I know there's going to be people out there that would rather say, screw it. I'd rather them not make a bowl game than go to the Birmingham Bowl or the TikTok Bowl, whatever. I get that. But there's still a lot of good that could come from it if they're able to be bowl eligible. And not just that, too. Right? There's 6 games to go. You win at least 4 of these next 6, 4, 5, whatever the case may be. You win at least 4 games to close out the regular season. Talk about the momentum that you could carry into next year. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that said, well, what happened last year with that momentum? It went out the window. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that also took place in the offseason, right? Multiple players entered the transfer portal. You lost your left tackle in the spring game, lost your right tackle first series in against North Carolina. Again, not excuses, just facts. So we'll see. But our L said the TikTok Bowl is lit, though. That'd be something. Keep me the hell away from that one. It'd be a bunch of
Corvette,
18-year-olds,
Mike.
18-year-olds just holding their phones out, just dancing around. I don't know. Getting old. The old man, get off my lawn. All right. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yu. Appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. If you missed any of our show or you want to rewatch it, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page where you can subscribe for free, where you can watch not just all these GC Live Talking Tuesday shows, but the rest of the GC Live slate, as well as any other Gamecock Central show. Yeah, they got the walkthrough on Sunday nights. Or if you're a podcast listener, head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network, where you can listen to this on your tablet or wherever you get your devices, all that kind of fun stuff, especially if you like to listen to podcasts in the car. Again, he's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuba. Appreciate you guys spending your Tuesday night with us. We'll do it again next week.